Hello and welcome to Miss Hannah Loves Grammar. In this video we'll be answering the question, what is an interrupter and where should commas go with one in a sentence? So an interrupter is a pretty exciting prospect actually. It's a little thought that is added or pops up in the middle of a sentence to show your emotion, your tone or your emphasis. Let me give you an example that's incorrect. The sun, I was delighted to see, was rising. Now, as you can tell, my intonation tells you that there are three separate parts to this sentence. But the joy of the interrupter is it's clear to see for the reader, not just the listener like you were. So you need to surround the interrupter with commas so that the pop-up thought or the new idea that you have mid-sentence is clear. Otherwise, this sentence reads pretty confusedly. Let's see the correct version. The sun, I was delighted to see, was rising. As you can see, I have a comma after the word sun and a comma after the word see. I was delighted to see is my emotional reaction upon seeing the sunrise. And as I'm seeing it, the sentence could just be the sun was rising, but I'm adding my emotional input, hence why we have the commas. Let's look at our next example that's wrong. It was thankfully the last day of exams. The emotional or tone shift that we understand should be separated because there's an interrupter in this sentence. I could have just said it was the last day of exams, but I've given you some additional information that is an interrupter. It should instead read, it was, thankfully, the last day of exams. This time I've even shared with you where the commas are because, thankfully, that adverb is adding emphasis and emotion to the fact that I'm relieved it's the last day of exams. So interrupters are actually quite important because they illustrate our additional new thoughts as we're sharing them. And they're often used more in speech than in writing. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't consider where commas would go if we were recording the speech that's being shared. And also consider that if we are going to have layered thoughts with interrupters within them, we must always use commas. Now it's your turn. For each of the 5 sentences, identify if an interrupter is there and if that interrupter has been punctuated correctly with commas between it. Hit pause if you need thinking time. Jimmy's attitude, if you can call it that, was not ideal. If you can call it that, is an interrupter, and that whole phrase is contained between 2 commas, and is grammatically correct. The cake, as she looked at it, was looking more delicious. This additional interrupter with as she looked at it is intensifying and emphasising how much this person is thinking about the cake. The interrupter is punctuated correctly, as she looked at it is contained between commas. This is correct. The moon, as the night sky shone, looked stunning. Now I've added emphasis, but there are no commas present. Therefore, this sentence is technically incorrect, even though it does contain an interrupter. It should read like this. The moon, as the night sky shone, looked stunning. So the original sentence was not correct, as we have just corrected it. It was annoyingly the last one available in the shop. Now this is something that we could casually write, but it's incorrect. We should have written instead, it was, annoyingly, the last one available in the shop. Annoyingly, that adverb is being emphasised with its emotion as an interrupter between 2 commas, because that's what we always do with interrupters. We sandwich them between 2 commas. And finally, when you think about it, and who doesn't, this is worrying. This is correct. The interrupter is used correctly with commas around it. Ultimately, the function of the interrupter is to add the new thought or the pop-up thought that you've got and interrupting the flow of your sentence. It shouldn't, though, affect the clarity. So remember, the job of the interrupter is to add new information, and it must always be contained within commas. Why not subscribe to Miss Hannah Loves Grammar for all things English, literary and grammatical?